Good afternoon, class of 2021, and good afternoon, learners. Welcome to this wonderful learning session. Today we are going to look at a topic in business cycles titled The New Economic Paradigm. I would love for you to get your materials ready, everything that you think that you are going to need in order to be able to successfully follow through this learning experience. Without any waste of time, let me introduce myself to yourself. My name is Mr. Yilo. I am an economics teacher from Lehulong Secondary School, and I am here today to come and help you with the new economic paradigm, which is, as I said earlier, that it's a topic that you will find in business cycles chapter. Now, before we waste any time, I want us to look at the key concepts. What are the key concepts? These are the concepts that we are going to come across as the lesson unfolds today. So I think that it is very important that we explain what these words mean, what these concepts mean, so that when we come across them as the lesson unfolds, we do not get confused and stuck along the way. So the first word that we are going to look at is the word paradigm. It's very important that we must understand what the word paradigm means, because remember, we are going to look at the new economic paradigm. But then someone out there, Elena, may be asking themselves, what does this word paradigm mean? So a word paradigm is a way of thinking. It's just a way of thinking differently from our traditional way of thinking. So that is what a paradigm is. And then the other word that we are going to come across as this lesson unfolds is the smoothing out of the business cycle, smoothing out the business cycles. Smoothing out the business cycles means reducing the fluctuations within the economy. You will now remember that a business cycles itself has got the fluctuations, which we would refer to them as the upswings or the downswings or the expansions and the contractions within the economy. So when we reduce those fluctuations, those upswings and downswings, that is what we refer to as smoothing out the business cycles. And of course, along the lesson, we are going to come across the demand side policies. We are also going to come across words such as the supply side policies. Now let us look at what the demand side policies mean. The demand side policies are just the government policies that are aimed at increasing economic growth by increasing aggregate demand within the economy. So which means this is the policy that is executed by the government with the aim of increasing the total demand within the economy. The word aggregate means total demand within the economy. And of course, the other policies that we are going to look at are the supply side policies, where these are the policies that the government puts in place with the aim of increasing productivity and increase efficiency within the economy. So you will remember now that when we talk about productivity, productivity looks at businesses, because businesses are the businesses are the ones that are responsible for producing goods and services within the economy. Therefore, the supply side policies are those policies that the government puts in place in order to give support to the businesses so that our businesses may be able to produce more goods and services within the economy, so that there is a smooth running of the economy, and of course the economy is able to grow. The other policy that we are going to look at is the monetary policy. So the monetary policy, it refers to the actions that are undertaken by the nation's central bank to control the money supply and also achieve the macroeconomic goals that would promote sustainable development within the country. So you would remember now that this, our central bank in South Africa is the South African Reserve Bank. So all those actions, all those activities that are undertaken by South African Reserve Bank in order to ensure that the government achieve its macroeconomic goals so that our country can experience sustainable development. That is what the monetary policy refers to. And then the other policy that we would come across is the fiscal policy. The fiscal policy refers to the actions that are undertaken by the government, the national government, to adjust its spending levels and, of course, its tax rates to monitor and to influence the nation's economy. Those are the key concepts that we are going to come across as the lesson unfolds. So it is very important that you know and you understand these key concepts closely and completely. Now, we are getting into the business of the day. So today, the topic is about the new economic paradigm. So let us look at what is it that the government wants to achieve within the country, and of course, what could be the problems that would be hindering the government from achieving whatever that it sets to itself to achieve. And then from there, we would look at the inception of this new economic paradigm. So, as an introduction here, the aim of the government, it is to ensure that there is economic stability into the country, and to also create conditions that would reduce fluctuations, which are the upswings and the downswings in our business cycles or in the economy. Now, in doing so, the government would encourage high rates of economic growth, which will not result in high rates of inflation, which means now the government wants to achieve economic stability. The government wants to achieve one of its goals, which is economic growth, to achieve economic growth within the country. But this economic growth should not be coupled with inflation. In other words, it should be an economic growth that does not lead to inflation. So the government is aiming for a slow, sustainable growth rather than fast growth, which is not sustainable. So the government does not need a rapid economic growth which cannot last. In other words, when you say sustainable, it means that we need an economic growth that would last us for long, rather than to have a fast or the quick economic growth which will not be sustainable. Because fast economic growth would result in bad declines with deep troughs. In other words, if the economy is growing at a very fast rate, it may be expected that such economy again will dip too deep very fast. And then, however, learners, it is very important to understand that fluctuations can never be completely omitted within the economy. In other words, what do we mean by that? Can we take a pause on that? My apologies for the glitch. So we were saying that fluctuations in the economy can never be completely omitted. In other words, remember we said that we need now to smooth out the business cycles. In other words, by so saying, we do not mean that fluctuations in economy will be completely omitted. Fluctuations in the economy will still be there, however, they need to be well managed. Now, therefore, in effort to achieve this objective of economic growth within the country and economic stability within the country, the new economic paradigm was adopted. The new economic paradigm came into being. Now, let us look at the concept, the new economic paradigm in itself. What is a new economic paradigm? So remember earlier on we had mentioned that the word paradigm means a new way of thinking. So the new economic paradigm, it is a new way of thinking which discourages the policy makers within the country from using only the demand side policies, which in this case are our monetary policy and our fiscal policy, to fine-tune the economy. But the new economic paradigm, it encourages the policymakers to use both the demand and supply side policies together in order to achieve stability within the economy. I repeat, the new economic paradigm, which is a new way of thinking, it discourages the policy workers or policy makers from using only the demand side policies in fine-tuning the economy or in smoothing out the business cycles. In other words, by so saying, we mean that it discourages these policymakers from using monetary policy and fiscal policy only when they try to stabilize the economy. But it encourages the policymakers to use both demand side policies and supply side policies in conjunction if they have to achieve stability within the economy. Now, we are going to look at each policy. For example, we are going to look at the demand side policies, and we are also going to look at the supply side policies. We are going to look at the goodness or the advantages of the demand side policies, and also look at maybe the possible disadvantages of using demand side policies alone. And then later on, we will go to the supply side policies and also try to explain the importance of using the supply side policies in conjunction with the demand side policies. Now remember, we said that the demand side policies are the policies that are aimed at stimulating the aggregate demand in the economy. These policies are used to stimulate the demand within the economy. Now, there are two policies that falls under demand side policies. The two policies that falls under the demand side policies is your monetary policy as well as your fiscal policy. Those are the two demand side policies which you must always know. So remember we said earlier on that the monetary policy is executed by the South African Reserve Bank, which means the South African Reserve Bank is the one that executes the monetary policy, and the South African Reserve Bank as an institution, it has its own instruments that it uses in order to influence the demand within the economy. One of the biggest instruments available to the hands of the South African Reserve Bank is repo rates, the interest rates, which means the South African Reserve Bank uses the interest rates in order to influence the consumer demand within the economy. And the other policy that is used is the fiscal policy. Now, as I said when I explained the key concepts, the fiscal policy is a policy that is undertaken or it is executed by the national government through the Department of National Treasury. So, like monetary policy, the fiscal policy or the national government has its own instrument available at its own disposal that it can use in order to influence the demand within the economy. And the two instruments that are available to at the disposal of the national government, the first one is taxation tax, and the second one is government spending. Those are the two instruments that are available for the national government whenever it wants to influence the demand within the economy. So those are the two policies that falls under the demand side policies. Let us look at these demand side policies further. Let us look at these demand side policies further. And I would love to be a little bit slower here so that I do not leave any one of you behind. So remember we said that the demand side policies are the policies that are aimed at achieving or influencing and increasing demand within the economy. So this policy the focus is to increase the aggregate demand within the economy, which will lead to economic growth. So you will remember that economic growth, it focuses on the production of goods and services within the economy. However, now, there is no way that the production in the economy can increase if there is no demand. If there is a shortage of demand, businesses will produce the quantities of goods and services that will be demanded or that are demanded. Otherwise, if they produce more than what people are demanding, then it means businesses will run at some sort of loss. Therefore, if aggregate demand is stimulated in the economy, then it means businesses will also be encouraged to produce more goods and services in order to meet the demand of the economy within the economy. Therefore, let us look at this aggregate demand within the economy. It is important that we must understand that the aggregate demand is a function of consumption expenditure by households, investment spending by businesses, government spending, plus net exports, which means exports when we minus the imports. That is how we would calculate our aggregate demand within the economy. Like you would remember from the chapter on circular flow, we would say that aggregate demand is equals to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. In other words, demand in the economy will be stimulated when consumption expenditure by households on durable goods and non-durable goods increases. Households, they are the primary consumers. Yes, we would remember from the circular flow, which means now if they demand more goods and more services, then it means demand in the economy will have increased in a way. So remember, households, they spend money, they are demanding durable, non-durable goods such as food, such as clothing items, and many other goods or services, because you will remember again in economics we say that people have unlimited needs and unlimited wants. Aggregate demand also is not only the function of consumption expenditure by household, but also investment spending by businesses. Remember, businesses need to spend on capital goods, they need to spend on equipment, they also need to spend on buildings to which in which they produce goods and services. Therefore, that is the demand from the side of the businesses. And the government is also demanding. Government spending, remember, the government is also spending on goods and services such as public goods and also the merit goods. And you will remember that government spending on its own, it creates jobs for people or for the consumers within the economy, which in return will still it would still increase the aggregate demand within the economy. And then the exports are those locally produced goods that we're selling overseas. Locally produced goods sold overseas, those are our exports. So exports represent an inflow of demand, which means now you would realize that when we export to other countries, our demand increases, which means because our business, the demand for goods and services that are produced by our South African businesses are not only limited to South African citizens, but also people from abroad are also demanding. So which means there is an inflow of demand. It increases on the demand that we have already existing within our country. And the imports, which are the goods that are produced abroad, when they are purchased by the local citizens, businesses, as well as government. So imports, will remember that it is a leakage, an outflow of demand, or an outflow of money. Please pardon my my slides there. I wrote in bracket injections. It's a mistake. It should be it's a leakage. So imports do not necessarily contribute to our local demand, but it takes away the demand. It reduces the demand from the country as citizens of our country demands good from foreign countries. So imports do not contribute in any of our domestic demand, therefore would not contribute to our economic growth. Now, the demand side policies, as we have explained, the demand side policies are good at stimulating economic growth. How and why do we say that the demand side policies are stimulating economic growth? You will remember now that we said that economic growth is measured by the production capacity of the country. So which means now the country is able to produce more goods and services. Economic growth is measured by the productivity, remember, of the country. Productivity is the responsibility, production is the responsibility of businesses. So when businesses are able to produce more goods and services, then it means now that our economy will grow. And then, yes, as the economy grows, or let me put it simple, when businesses produce more, when the productivity of businesses increases, businesses need to employ people in the process of in the process. Remember, labor is a factor of production. So there is no way that there can be an increase in the productivity of businesses without businesses demanding workers, people who would come and work. Therefore, because now when the productivity of businesses increases, businesses will employ more people. Therefore, it means that this demand side policy is good at one thing. The first thing is that demand side policies, as much as they stimulate productivity of businesses, as much as they contribute to economic growth in the country, they are very good at creating jobs for people in the country. Now, that is a very good thing if people can get employment within their country where they stay. It's very good. You know that in South Africa, for example, unemployment is the biggest problem at the moment. So now, these demand side policies, if demand side policies are used without the supply side policies, they are more likely to cause inflation within the country. So that is the only disadvantage. That is the only wrong thing with maybe using the demand side policies, because they stimulate the economy so much that people get jobs. When people have jobs, people have money, and when people have money, they want to spend the money on goods and services. Now remember that when they spend money on goods and services, you will remember that in the short run, some of the factors of production are fixed, which means when demand increases, it doesn't mean that the suppliers will be able to supply, will be able to meet the demand when the demand increases. So that is the reason why inflation tends to kick in. In other words, we say that if aggregate supply is falling deficient of aggregate demand, therefore, to discourage the demand within the economy, prices will increase. And that increase in the prices is what we refer to as inflation, which is a general and sustained increase in prices over a period of time. Now, we are going to make use of a graph to show that indeed, if demand side policies are used to stimulate the demand within the economy, and the supply does not respond when demand increases, this situation will lead to inflation, will lead to a situation where even the income that people have from their jobs, which they have just received now, will not be enough for them to be able to meet their basic needs and wants, because products out there are expensive. We are going to do that. We are going to look at that by using a graph. So we are going to use a graphical illustration that shows that if supply is falling deficient of demand, then that causes inflation in the economy. So let us look at our graphical illustration. I hope that I will make it good enough so that. So on this axis, it's our prices, average prices. And then on this side, that would be our quantities. So which means when you say quantities, this is the quantity demanded and of course the quantities supplied at the same time. And here we have our 0. Now, this is our supply curve of goods and services, and this is our demand curve. You would remember at the point where supply and demand interact, it is our equilibrium point. So we would denote it by the letter E there, at equilibrium. So this is the situation before the government uses the demand side policies to stimulate the demand within the economy. So let us say that before the government stimulates our aggregate demand within the economy, our average prices were P, and the quantities demanded and supplied were denoted by quantity Q. That is the original situation. Before the government intervenes, before the government uses the demand side policies within the economy. Now, the government uses the demand side policies. Remember, when the government uses the demand side policies, the government wants to increase the quantity demanded within the economy. So when the government uses the demand side policies, both the maybe monetary, it may be fiscal policy, remember we said the demand in the economy will increase. So let us show that. The red curve shows an increase in demand. So our demand curve now has increased. Let us show by arrows that our demand has increased. You will remember from grade 10 that any movement from the original demand curve to the right of it indicates an increase in demand. And every movement from the original demand curve to the left, it indicates the decrease in demand. So now, because the government has now stimulated the demand in the economy, our aggregate demand shifts to the right, which shows that it's an increase in demand, and it moves from D to D1. Take note that we have new market forces now. Here are our new market forces where our demand and supply interact. Therefore, we have a new equilibrium. That means we have a new equilibrium that we can call equilibrium 1. indeed the quantities produced, quantities demanded there increases from Q to Q1. But here is the important thing now. Let's look at what happens to the prices. Our prices have increased from P to P1. Here is an increase in price. What do we see? We see that when the demand side policies are used in the economy, they will stimulate the quantity, the aggregate demand in the economy. The aggregate demand in the economy will increase from D to D1, and it will give us the new market forces. Remember now, in the market, prices are determined by them. In the economy, prices are determined by the market forces of demand and supply. Therefore, we have new market forces. So the price has increased from P to P1 because demand in the economy has increased, but supply remains fixed. The supply did not increase. The supply remained fixed. In other words, when demand was increasing. So remember, we said that if demand increase and supply does not increase, then that would cause an inflation in the economy. And such a situation is shown in this graph. Demand has increased, supply remained where it has always been, but now prices have increased. And that increase in price is what we refer to as inflation. That price increase is what we refer to as inflation, because our average prices have always been P, but now, because of an increase in demand, our average prices have increased from P to P1, which means now the prices of goods and services have become more expensive than they have always been previously. Now, this means that the income that people are now receiving from the jobs that they've received is not enough. The income is not enough. They are unable to meet all their basic needs. That is the bad thing about about inflation. Inflation takes away the purchasing power of people. The income of people becomes so much less that it cannot purchase everything that they need. Now let us see then, what would then happen if when aggregate demand increases and aggregate supply also increases. This was just a situation where when aggregate demand increases, aggregate supply remains fixed. But let us check what would happen then if when aggregate demand increases, aggregate supply also increases at the same time. What would happen to the prices? I am now going to use a green pen to illustrate a movement in the aggregate supply. I'm hoping, and I'm just going to do it like this. Good. That's how I know how to do it better. So this is our aggregate supply. So now we have a situation when aggregate demand increases, aggregate supply also increases. So what do we see then? We now see that our aggregate supply has also increased. Aggregate demand increases, aggregate supply also increases when aggregate demand increases. So we have new market forces here, and let us call it E2. We can call it E2. Sorry for that. We can call it E2. I just need to fix this and put it in back. Now, the quantity increased from Q to Q2, but here is the most important thing. Are you aware that when aggregate demand increases and aggregate supply increases, our prices remains fixed where they have always been? In other words, if aggregate demand increases and aggregate supply also increases, then we will not have a problem of inflation because our prices will remain the same, and that is a good thing, that when aggregate demand increases, aggregate supply also increases, because then it means that we would not experience any inflation in the economy, because both demand and supply in the economy has increased. And I believe that this is the reason why now the new economic paradigm encourages the policymakers that they need to start using both the demand side policies as well as the supply side policies in order to stimulate the economy. Because stimulating the demand side policies alone, or using the demand side policies alone in the economy, yes, may be good when it comes to providing people with jobs, may be good when it comes to growing the economy. However, the only problem thereof is that it causes inflation. Therefore, if aggregate demand, or if demand side policies and supply side policies are used together within the economy, we would not have a problem such as the problem of inflation. As, of course, the graph which I have illustrated to you has proven to us that indeed prices will remain fixed if it happens that when demand increases, then supply also increases at the same time. Now let us go back to our business of the day. Just a minute. So this is a graph that I've just illustrated to you now. I'm hoping that you manage to understand this graph. I'm not going to dwell too much into it because I've illustrated it and I have explained it to you. Therefore, I wish to now move on to the next slide. Okay, fine. This slide only increases what I've already said. I had already mentioned that if aggregate demand increases more quickly than aggregate supply in the economy, prices will increase. So if supply does not react, which means if supply does not increase when the demand increases, prices will increase, which means inflation will kick in. And of course, that increase in the prices is what we call inflation, which is a sustained and considerable increase in the general prices. Now, learners, I would love for us to look at the last part of this new economic paradigm, looking at the other, the supply side policies. I would love for us to look at the supply side policies. The supply side policies. Remember the supply side policies? We said that they are the policies that are aimed at increasing productivity within the economy. And we had already mentioned earlier on that businesses are mainly responsible of producing goods within the economy. So, supply side policies wants to help businesses to be able to produce more goods and services within our economy. Now, the supply side policies has different strategies. So, some of the strategies that are embedded in the supply side policy are the strategies that improve the factor productivity. So the factor productivity, would remember that we're looking about improving the factors of production. If we improve the factors of production, business would be able to produce more goods and services. Business will be able to be very productive. So remember, in grade 11, we did mention that we use the factors of production to produce goods and services within the country. So maybe it is important, or not even maybe, it is indeed for sure that it is important that the factors productivity be improved, if then businesses in our country would be able to produce more goods and services. For example, under the factor productivity, we are looking at improving the workers, better workers. We need better workers because it's important that workers may have skills, may have competencies, and may be able to do their work as they are supposed to do it. And then the other strategies are strategies to improve business performance, how the business performs. And then those strategies are looking at better businesses which would be able and capacitated to do their job and become productive within the economy. Now let us look at these supply side policies. Number one, the government needs to decrease the production costs for businesses. We are going to explain all these things closely and completely. Number two, the government needs to increase the efficiency of inputs for businesses. Number three, the government needs to improve the efficiency of the markets. Those are the three strategies that the government needs to look at if it has to help our businesses to become more productive within our economy. Now, let us look at the strategy of decreasing the production cost. By decreasing the production cost, the government encourages businesses to produce more at the same prices. In other words, now to ensure that all the businesses have got maybe more or less the same production cost, the government may provide the infrastructure and services to the businesses. For example, of the infrastructure that may be provided by the government to businesses is the energy infrastructure. Businesses need electricity in order for them to be able to successfully run their businesses. Looking at load shedding in South Africa, how load shedding is impacting the smooth running of our businesses. So energy should be available every time, every day, 24 hours for businesses to be able to successfully run and be effective. The government needs to also provide transport infrastructure. Transport infrastructure is very important for the smooth running of the businesses. For example, because now some of the raw materials that businesses uses, they need to be transported from one area to another area. So that transport infrastructure would be for example, the roads. It can also be the air transport, such as the airports, because some of the goods are transported by means of airlines, which is the aeroplanes, and then also the telecommunication infrastructure. But please do understand that the infrastructure that the government can provide to businesses is not limited to only energy, transport, and telecommunications. It goes wide and far. So the telecommunication is very important because businesses then, nowadays, we are living in the 21st century. Businesses now, everything is done over the internet. Making orders, people can purchase online, communication over the phone, communication over the emails, internet, social media for advertising and all that. So if such infrastructure is put in place, then businesses will be able to would be run successfully and would be very productive within the country. Again, the government can provide subsidies to businesses for them to increase their production. The government can give financial help. Remember, a subsidy is a financial help from the government to businesses, and the biggest aim is to cut. The objective thereof is to cut the production costs of the businesses. So when the government subsidizes the businesses, then it means that the cost of production for businesses will decrease a little bit, and therefore businesses will be able to what? Businesses will be productive, because now their cost of production have been reduced by the government through subsidies. And the government can also decrease administrative costs such as red tape, provide reports, and also do inspections in order for businesses to be able to become productive. We have looked at decreasing the cost of production. Now let us look at the other strategy, which is increasing the efficiency of inputs. Increasing the efficiency of inputs. So the first thing there, the government can decrease the tax rates for businesses to increase their supply. So remember, tax is more like a cost to a business. So if taxes are high, and especially now we're looking at the company taxes, if the company taxes are high, then it means that businesses won't be able to produce much, because that tax can be seen as a cost to the businesses. It hinders the businesses from producing more, maybe as it would wish to produce. And then the government, secondly, can raise the depreciation rate of capital goods. Now remember, what are the capital goods? Capital refers to all the machines that are used by the business to produce. That is what capital is. So if capital goods are the machines, the equipment used within the business, then it means that capital has got to do with some kind of technology, technological goods. So if the government raises the depreciation rate, then it means that these capital goods would depreciate, would lose value very soon, so that the businesses are now able to invest in into latest technology. So which means the machines that they keep using, they become obsolete. And as they become obsolete, then the businesses need to buy new machines which are of latest technology, which would now help them to be able to produce efficiently and effectively. So they would become more productive, because if they are stuck with old technology, then that can hinder their productivity. The other strategy that can be used by the government, it is to improve the quality of human resource. So when we talk about human resource, we're talking about the human beings. We're talking about people that are working within the businesses. For example, labor, the workers within the businesses. Workers are very much important for the productivity. It is important that workers are capacitated in order for them to be able to do their jobs closely and completely. Now, what is it that the businesses can do? What can be done to human resources? The businesses can provide their workers with training. They can provide them with some bursaries, so that they build their skills, they increase their skills. And when they are skilled, then they would become very productive within the companies where they work. And their productivity, of course, leads to the productivity of the business. And then the last one, under increasing the efficiency of inputs, would be providing the free advisory services. So businesses can give free advisory services to the businesses, such as providing or giving them the weather forecast, and also telling them about the export opportunities which they can take advantage of. That is one other thing that the government can do in order to increase the efficiency of inputs in the market. Now we would look at the last strategy under the supply side policy. Under the supply side policy, The last strategy, therefore, would be improving the efficiency of markets. Improving the efficiency of markets. So to improve the efficiency of markets, the government can use deregulation. What is to deregulate? The deregulation means the removal of laws as a way of reducing government intervention. So if other laws are removed, which are the laws which hinders the businesses in their free practice, then it means that business would be able to have some freedom of being able to be productive, because there are some of the laws which were put in place which were hindering them before. And then number two, it is the competition. Competition, the government can encourage the development of new businesses by supporting SMMEs, which are the small medium enterprises, and also enforcing the Competition Act. So the government can encourage that there must be competition in the country, can encourage those small, medium businesses. And of course, in South Africa, we have the Competition Act, which ensures that there is a competition in the country, because competition in the country is very healthy, because it makes prices reasonable. And of course, competition gives people choice. We can mention a lot of things which I do know that you will learn about this as time goes on, the importance of competition. And then lastly, the government can privatize some of its companies to increase competition. Remember, privatization is a process where now the state-owned enterprises, which are the companies that are owned by the government, are now sold to the private individuals, to be owned by the private individuals. In so doing, the competition in the country increases. So learners, what do we learn now? In reflection, what do we learn now? We learn that the new economic paradigm teaches us that it is very important that the demand side policies are used together with the supply side policies. If then, honestly, stability in the economy is expected, because we have learned that using the demand side policies alone does not work for the economy, as it would end up causing the demand push inflation. So therefore, it needs to use both the demand and the supply side policies. We looked at the demand side policies, and we also mentioned that they would end in inflation. We looked at the strategies which can be used by the government in order to ensure that businesses are productive within the country. Now, within the last 5 minutes that we are left with, I would love to wrap off this lesson with another curve which we call the Phillips curve, which would also show us that indeed situation within the economy becomes better if demand side policies are used in conjunction with the supply side policies. Going to look at the Phillips curve. Now, you will remember that the Phillips curve is a graph that shows the relationship between unemployment as well as inflation rate. So what does the Phillips curve teaches us? Phillips curve teaches us that when unemployment is high, inflation rate will be low. And when unemployment is low, inflation rate will be high. So then let us illustrate this curve. So on this axis, it is our inflation rate. This is our inflation rate. And on this axis, it is our unemployment. Right. Let me take it up a little bit so that we can see good. Now, let me draw the Phillips curve. I'm hoping that I will be good. So this line here is not a line, it's a curve, and that we call it Phillips curve. I will label it PC0, Phillips curve 0. Oh my goodness. Just a minute again. That is 0. So, let us make a point here and make it point A. We have a point here, so we will make it point A. So, at point A, we would say that unemployment is equals to 14%. We would say unemployment is equals to 14%. Remember now we are drawing this. We are drawing this graph, and here I'm not using the real economy. I'm using my own hypothetical economy. In other words, the economy that is not real, because indeed in South Africa at the moment unemployment is not 14%. So no, I'm not using the real statistics that of the country here. I'm using my own hypothetical world statistics. So let us say at point A, the economy has got the unemployment of 14%. So there's something that I want you to look at. Please be aware that when unemployment was the highest, according to this graph, when unemployment was the highest at 14%, our inflation rate was the lowest at 0. So when unemployment is the highest at 14%, our inflation rate is 0. So it proves that indeed when unemployment is high, then inflation rate will be 0. Now suppose that our government intervenes by using the demand side policies to stimulate the demand. Our government is now intervening in the economy, and it uses the demand side policies only to stimulate the demand in the economy. I want us to make another point here. When the government is using the demand side policies, it's stimulating the aggregate demand in the economy by stimulating the demand by using the demand side policies. We would have a new point here, and that is point B. Please be aware that this curve now comes as a result of government having used demand side policy in the economy. So we have point B. What does this point B tell us? The point B tells us now that these demand side policies that have been used in the economy has increased output in the economy. And as it has increased output in the economy, it has even created jobs for other people within the economy. Therefore, let us see what it happens. At point B, our unemployment now starts to drop from 14 to, let's say, 12%. Why did unemployment drop? The unemployment has dropped because the government has stimulated the aggregate demand. The government has used the demand side policies in the economy, and the demand side policies, remember we said that they would create jobs for people. So now 2% of this unemployed population managed to get a job as a result of using the demand side policy. So unemployment has decreased from 14 to 12%. But as unemployment is dropping, let's see what happens to inflation. The inflation increases from 0 to, let's say, 3%. What do we observe here? We observe that indeed the theory that when unemployment decreases, inflation increases is proven to be correct, is proving true. This Phillips curve graph is proving that theory, that the higher the unemployment, the lower the inflation rate. And the lower the unemployment, the higher the inflation rate. So inflation rate is increasing as unemployment is decreasing. Suppose now that the government wishes to use both the demand and the supply side policies together in smoothing out the business cycles. I will draw the second Phillips curve. Let me use a different pen. Remember, here we have the 12. The 12% is our new unemployment rate at this point. I want you to be aware what happens. Now, let's say this is 8%. So, and we can call this C. This one is our Phillips curve number 2. So what happens now, when government uses both demand and supply side policies together, situation within the economy becomes better, because now you can see that if demand and supply side policies were used together, the highest unemployment rate, instead of being 14 in the economy, it would have been 12% with an inflation rate of 0. But now, when the government uses both the demand and supply side policies, of course, unemployment decreases from this 12 to 8%, but the inflation rate remains at 3%. So the situation now becomes much better than it was before, when the government was using only the demand side policies in the economy. So this first Phillips curve comes as a result of government using only the demand side policy. And this one comes as a result of government using the demand as well as the supply side policies. So we have learned that indeed, when unemployment decreases, inflation would decrease. But we do learn that if the government uses both the demand and the supply side policies in the economy to smooth out the business cycles, situations become better than what they were when the government was only using the demand side policies. Ladies and gentlemen, learners, I think we have come to the end of this learning experience. Hope that it was informative. I'm wishing you everything of the best for this academic year. I do believe that you will go back to your books, integrate the information that you have received from me today with the information that your teacher has provided you. Study your textbook and do very, very well. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.